everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're gonna make a really quick, easy, fun, and useful zip pouch using pattern pieces from one of my all-time favorite patterns. Today, we're gonna be making a quick nylon, no lining zip pouch using the pattern pieces from the Catalina crossbody pattern by Aura Rosa Patterns. So first, let me just quickly show you my everyday bag. This is the bag I literally wear every single day. This is the Catalina crossbody. I'm not going to show you the other side because it is pretty dirty because I do use it all the time. It could use a little wipe down, to be honest. But I love this shape. I love this size. It holds everything I need. And as many of you guys know, I'm a big fan of Stony Clover. Now, Stony Clover is known for all of their amazing pouches, and their pouches are made of this beautiful nylon material. This nylon material is very easy to wipe down. It's very easy to keep clean. It's just very durable. It lasts a long time. I mean, it's just perfect. It's just perfect. And I love these kind of, shapes. And I was thinking this shape is very similar to this shape. So, could we put these together somehow? Also, my good friend Gabby over at Wonderground Fabrics was on the hunt for a very long time to find the perfect nylon material, because you would think getting material that's nylon like this would be easy, but it's not. It was very challenging. However, Gabby worked some magic, found some beautiful nylon that has the same feel, the same texture. It's absolutely wonderful. Grabbed it. She did offer this in her shop, Wonderground Fabrics, for a while. Currently, as of the day of filming, it is sold out, but I know that a big restock is on the way. So, by the time this video comes out, I'm hoping there is material available. So as you can see, this is the same shape as the Catalina. I'm making it very simple though. All I'm doing is using the main panel for the front and the back, and then I'm using the gusset for the bottom and then the zipper gussets for the top. Now here's the thing that makes this bag so quick. It has no lining. And that's what I love about this material. This nylon material, it is durable. It is great on the back as it is on the front. Both sides are easy to keep clean, easy to wipe down. You don't really need a lining. You don't need to cover up the back side here. However, I do like to cover seams. So what this pouch has is a nylon front, back, bottom, top, all of that. But then for the inside, I do use a couple pieces of waterproof canvas or water resistant canvas, whichever is easiest. This is actually water resistant canvas because it's a little bit more lightweight. But I'm going to be using that for the back of the zipper panels and then also for the binding on the inside. This bag comes together so fast. It is a great pouch. So let's say you purchased the Catalina crossbody, but there are a lot of things going on in that bag. That bag is so stinking useful because it has the best pockets ever. So that might be a little intimidating for you. So if you're like, well, I want to do the Catalina crossbody, but I'm not quite sure I'm ready for that yet, try this first. Try like the little Catalina pouch first, Do this and then work your way up to the Catalina crossbody. I think you're gonna really love making this. So I'll be walking you through all of the pieces I used from the pattern today. You will need to have the pattern in order to follow this tutorial. So again, even if you're not planning on making the crossbody, to be completely honest, I feel like it's a pattern that every bag maker should have in their stash at all times because you just never know when you're gonna need that bag. I'm gonna be playing around with this just a little bit because I do feel like this is pretty narrow, and you can see here's the Stony Clover one. It's much wider, it's also much bigger, but I do think I want to try to widen out the bottom gusset and the top gusset. So I'm gonna leave the front and the back panel the same, but I'm gonna widen out the top and the bottom just a little bit, see if we can get more of like a wider box. We'll see. So if you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, anything at all, leave them down in the comments section. I will have timestamps for this. This is a quick tutorial, but there will be timestamps for every step. So if you're just interested in how do I attach the gusset to the front, I will have a timestamp for that. Don't you worry. All right, guys, let's get started. So for this, I would suggest at least a ½ yard of your material. I'm gonna be using that beautiful nylon material from Wonderground Fabrics. You could also use clear vinyl here. Honestly, you could use clear vinyl and not use any of that and just use clear vinyl and the zipper tape. However, I do like the look of these two combined. So you can use waterproof canvas here. You could use regular vinyl. You could use leather. Anything that you're okay with the backside acting as the lining. I personally don't really like the look of the backside a lot of material. However, this nylon material looks about the same on the front and the back, and both sides are really easy to wipe down, keep clean. The front is a little bit prettier. The back, I mean, it's really hard to tell, but it has a bit of a roughness to it. But again, it works great as a material that can be easy to wipe down. For the two small bits of lining and then the binding, I am going to be using this waterproof canvas. This is like a water resistant canvas. There are so many options out there nowadays. If you want to go with a solid color, that's a beautiful chic look. However, if you want like kind of like a really solid look on the outside, but then some pop of fun on the inside, there are some printed water resistant canvases out there that are so good. The big difference between waterproof canvas and a water resistant canvas, which is how a lot of businesses do label them, a water resistant canvas is thinner. Usually it's just more lightweight, it's thinner. It might not, you know, prevent water from going through it as well as a waterproof canvas, because the waterproof canvas, since it's thicker, has more of like a plastic layer on the back. However, this works fantastic for binding and linings because you don't have to add interfacing. You can easily use it. You can keep raw edges. It's fine. Huge fan of this. So I would suggest a ½ yard of this as well. Not a whole lot of extra stuff today. I'm going to be using like a 15-inch long zipper. It is longer than it needs to be, but you do want a nice long zipper with a zipper pull on it. The needles I'm using are Microtex 8012. I have a Gutermann thread for the bobbin, a Tex 35 weight thread for the top, my 1-inch by 6-inch ruler as always. I'll be using a vinyl marking pen. Even though I'm not using vinyl today, I'm not going to be marking anything on anything that's exposed. This is just for marking like midpoints on seams and things like that. This is a very minimal project, guys. There's really not a lot to do here. And then a pair of good fabric scissors is always handy. Also, of course, my two standards, my bag tag, which these are these UV printed bag tags, guys. I don't know if you can see, it almost looks like a iridescent effect. It's a rainbow, it's amazing. You gotta get some. And then of course my clips, lots and lots of clips. So like I said, the pattern I'm using for the basis of this bag is the Catalina crossbody pattern. Even if you're not ready to make the ultra chic Catalina crossbody, which I think is the best crossbody, everybody should have this pattern, you can still use the pattern pieces for this project. So this would be a great project to do before you try the crossbody. So you're going to use the main panel from that pattern, and you're going to have your two exterior pieces, which again, if you're using material that has a nice backside, it's also your lining piece. You just have two pieces of material here. And then for the top zipper gusset, so this is going to go around the zipper, you're going to have two pieces of material for your exterior and then two lining cuts, which is that water resistant canvas. Now I did alter this a little bit. I added a ½ inch to the width, so to the short side, but I added a ½ inch to the width of each of these. So these are a little bit chubbier than what the pattern suggests because I'm trying to make a bit of a wider pouch. So these are the same length, so long-wise, they're the same measurement as in the pattern. It's just width-wise, I added a ½ inch to all four of these pieces. And then you have the bottom gusset, which again is the same lengthwise, but width-wise, I added a full inch, 1 inch to the width. So those are the only differences I've made in this pattern besides just leaving off a lot of things. Obviously, I'm not doing any of the pockets or anything like that that are in the pattern. So I have that, and then I have 4 cuts of binding. So I have 2 short cuts of binding. Each of these is 1 inch by 5 inch. And then I have 2 long cuts of binding. Each of these are 1 inch wide by 36 inches long. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is start marking all your midpoints. You're going to want to mark the midpoints on the long edges. I'm going to say go ahead and mark the midpoints on the short edges as well. I want to try something today. So midpoints on all 4 edges of your main panels. Also, we don't need the binding just yet. Mark the midpoints on the long edges of your zipper gusset. And you can go ahead and mark the midpoint on the long sides as well of your long gusset, your bottom gusset. Also, don't forget to mark the midpoint on your zipper tape as well. It's just going to help with installation. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is install my bag tag, and I'm going to, let's put it down. I think I'm going to actually put it down about 1.5 inches from the top edge centered. So I like to use some double-sided tape to help with that. If you've been here a while, you know I always somehow end up making my bag tags a little crooked. I think it's when I'm at the sewing machine, my presser foot kind of pushes it. It is what it is. It's fine. Still looks great. So I have some double-sided tape on the back, and I'm just going to center this underneath my ruler. All right, there we go. That looks great. So now I'm just going to quickly top stitch around all 4 edges of my bag tag at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I forgot to mention this notion, which is a must-have. This is just a little stiletto from Biani. This is very, very helpful, especially with these curves today. You're gonna be glad you have a stiletto of some sort. So you'll notice that I will be using my zipper foot for pretty much all sewing today. I find it's just easier. we're gonna have to get close to zippers. We gotta get close to curved edges. Zipper foot just really makes sewing this whole thing much easier than a regular presser foot. And what I'm doing right now is I left the tails of the top thread and the bobbin really long when I attached my tag, and I pull all 4 of them to the back, and then I just triple knot them. And now this will be seen on the inside of the bag since we don't have a lining. So if you have something you want to cover it with, that's fine. I leave it, but I do have those little like 4 pokey pieces of thread since, you know, I cut it. So just to clean it up a little bit, I pull the material away from the thread and I gently grab a lighter and just melt down those little tails so it kind of like glues itself together. There we go. That looks great. So now let's just put it all together. It's pretty simple. So we're gonna grab our exterior top zipper gusset and lay it right side up. If you have a hard time with the nylon, just feel it. There's a softer side and then a little bit of a rougher side. The rougher side is the back. The softer side is the top. So lay that right side up and then take your zipper and lay it right side down and match up your midpoint marks. And then grab your clips and clip these together, right sides together. Now we're gonna take this to the machine and we're gonna baste along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that basted together, then you can even grab one of your lining zipper gusset panels and lay that right side down on the back side of your zipper tape and just make sure it lines up exactly with the other piece of material you already have attached. So I always clip together the corners first because sometimes with zipper tape it can get a little wavy, especially if you have a big zipper pull like I do. So doing the corners first and then just kind of moving the material around as you need to get it straight. I find that's the easiest way to attach these two. And if you have a really long zipper, you can move your zipper pull out of the way carefully, making sure you don't lose it. If you do lose it, it's okay. You can always reattach it. Okay, so now we're gonna sew this down. I'm gonna use a 3/8 inch seam allowance. You could also use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but I do prefer a 3/8 inch seam allowance with the number 5 zipper tape. So once you have these stitched together, now we're going to press the material, and I'm just gonna finger press this. If you have one of these, you could also just use the opposite end of the stiletto and kind of press it down like that. It works really well. So I'm gonna press this down, and then I'm also gonna press the exterior. We want our material to come together wrong sides together. And what I like to do is actually line up the bottom edges and the corners and clip those together. I find it's just easier. Okay, and then I'm gonna try this again because this seemed to work really well. I don't use this flattener side of my tool very much, but I should because it works really well. You'll love that. All right, now I'm gonna go top stitch right next to the zipper on the material at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, once we have that side top stitched on, now grab your remaining exterior top zipper gusset panel and lay it right side up. And then take your panel that already has a zipper and make sure the zipper is right side down and line up the midpoint marks once again with the long edge of your gusset and then clip them together at that midpoint mark and then just clip along the entire edge. I always try to make sure that my sides are lining up as well. If you see that the panel you're adding is way far to one side or the other, just shift it so that it's all lined up together. It should all be squared up nicely. All right, now let's baste along this edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. See, this is why you stitch down the edges of your zipper tape when you're doing this, because my zipper pull is just so heavy it fell off. So I'm gonna reinstall it. I'll show you how I do that. It's pretty easy. Whenever I install a zipper pull, what I do is I look at the zipper teeth, and as I open them up, I can tell there's zipper teeth, they go like this, right? They kind of stack on top of each other. I find out which side is on the top. So for example, on this one here, when I open it up, the left zipper tooth is on the top. And I just remember that because as I install my zipper pull, I just make sure the left side goes in first, and then I install the right side, and I look from the top and just make sure the left is on top. And you just have to get close to see this. And then as I do that, I just kind of push down on the top of the zipper pull until I can tell that it's in there. And then I hold down the edge of the zipper tape and pull on my zipper pull, double check it, yep, and so that way it's nice and straight. We're all good still. It happens. Okay, so now we're gonna take our unit and lay it zipper wrong side up. Take your remaining lining zipper gusset panel and lay it right side down and just line it up with that exterior piece and clip together. And now we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And now we're gonna press the material wrong sides together. So once again, I just start with the lining side I'm going to press it down with this handy dandy tool. There we go. And then I'll flip it to the exterior side. And then once again, as I'm pressing it down, what I'm going to do is match it up with the edges of the lining side and clip them together. And then I'm going to press down that seam again. I love this thing. I can't believe it's taken me this long to like really use it. I know I've tried it before, but this works great, especially with this material. That's fantastic. Okay, so now I'm going to top stitch along this side of the zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to baste around all of 4 edges of our new rectangle at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This will close up the zipper tape, so make sure your zipper is in the middle here, not off the edge, and it's also going to just hold everything in place. So once that's all sewn in place, I'm going to trim down my zipper teeth, or my zipper tape, because we don't need that long anymore. So once this is all sewn down, now what we're gonna do is attach the top gusset to the bottom gusset. And so if you wanted to add like some sort of like a pull tab or any sort of little tab here to make it easier to open and close this bag, you can add them. Just center them on the short edge of the big gusset right here. But I'm going to just skip that because I'm okay without those. So I'm gonna take my zipper panel and lay it right side down against the right side of the bottom gusset and match up those short edges. And these should match up width-wise. If one is bigger than the other, you can always trim it down. If it's just slightly bigger than the other, then I would just leave it, it's fine. But I'll tell you, I actually miscut my zipper panels for this tutorial. I made them 1/2 of an inch too big on each side because I cut them 1 inch wider than they needed to be. So I just quickly trimmed down 1/2 of an inch along both sides of this and then basted it, put it together, easy peasy. So I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. I'm just gonna clip these right sides together, and you will notice your bottom gusset is bigger than your zipper gusset. It's supposed to be. Okay, now we're gonna sew along both of these clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, this next step is completely optional. It does add a good amount of bulk, and it is not necessary by any means. Because what happens is this seam right here, you could just leave this raw because you will top stitch it down and it's going to look fine. However, if you're going for a complete no raw seam look, you're going to take those short cuts of waterproof canvas and let's just fold them long sides together, wrong sides together to match up the raw edges. I just like to kind of pre-crease them. I find it makes it easier to attach binding when it already has the midpoint creased. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap this around the seam to cover up the stitches. Just like that. Again, this does add a bit of extra bulk because we are going to stitch this down and then we're going to also top stitch the bottom gusset down in the next step, and then we have to sew it into curves and then bind it again. So there are a lot of layers here. So if this is not something you really need, then skip this. Or if you're worried about bulk, then skip this. But it does give it a pretty professional look, so I'm gonna show it. Okay, now I'm just gonna stitch this down. I go at about 3/8 of an inch in from the folded edge, just top stitching down the binding to cover up the raw edges. So now let's trim down the edges of the binding. I like it to be longer than it needs to be. I always like things to be a little bit longer, a little bit bigger than they need to be, so that way I can trim it down. Since I do tend to make mistakes, this helps limit them. Okay, so now what we want to do is flip this right side out, and you want to push the seam down behind the bottom gusset. So you're going to do this for both sides. I'm just going to kind of push it with my fingers and hold it in place at the machine. But once you push it behind the bottom gusset, then we're going to top stitch on the bottom gusset at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold that in place. All right, so now we have our gusset, our front and our back panel, and all we have to do is put it together. It's a little tricky because, you know, it is some pretty sharp curves. So let's start with the front panel, and that's the one that has my tag. You might have, you know, a design on here. You might have an applique. This would be a beautiful project to applique, like a piece of vinyl on this. Wow, that would look amazing. I wish I would have done that. Okay, but I have my front panel laying right side up. So now this is something I want to try. I don't know if it's going to work, but let's take our gusset and line up the midpoint mark on the top zipper gusset with the midpoint mark on the bottom large gusset, just like that. And then let's flatten out each side, because what I'm trying to do is find the midpoint between them. So I'm trying to find the quarter marks, right? I have these two mid marks here, but I want to find the midpoint between the top and the bottom. So that's there. So I'm going to grab my scissors and I'm just going to snip right along that edge. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side over here. go. And I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. So again, matching up the midpoint marks and then just pulling and pinching and then snipping on both sides. So this will give me quarter marks on both sides of my gusset panel. We'll see if this helps. We'll see. Because remember, I marked the midpoints on the short edges of my front and back panel as well. So we're going to see if this will help. So I like my gusset whenever it's closing for the zipper to go towards the left. So I have my main panel right side up, my gusset right side up with the zipper going towards the left when closing. And then I'm going to flip this gusset panel zipper right side down. So it's right sides together with the front panel. Match up the midpoint mark and clip on both sides of it. And then make sure you flip your gusset so that it's wrong side out. And then I'm going to turn this and I'm going to line up the midpoint mark on the bottom edge. So it's the bottom gusset and the bottom of the front panel. So clip those together. All right, now I'm going to take the whole unit and flip it so that I'm looking at the back side of the front panel. And let's find the midpoint mark on the short edge and then that little quarter mark we just made. Let's line those up and clip together. And do the same thing on the other side. And then once I have the 4 edges clipped together, now I'm going to do the curves. So what I like to do is just tuck in the curved portion of the main panel, kind of like a bowl, and I keep the gusset straight. So I try to get it all lined up like that. And if you have a little bit of bubbling or rippling, it's okay, we can still fix that. So I'm going to do this for all 4 corners, just kind of pushing this in and spreading it out. Okay, so if on any point of this corner you have some bubbling up of the main panel, so like it's just bubbling and you can't get it flat, on those corners just make a tiny snip about anywhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch into the gusset, and that's going to allow the gusset to spread out so that it's easier to sew this down without getting any sort of pinches or pleats. But you're not cutting the main panel, you're only cutting into the gusset. That's the only thing that needs to spread out here. So I'm going to gently do that to all 4 corners. All right, now we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew along this clipped curvy edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I like to sew it with the gusset wrong side up. I find it's easiest. That way I can spread out the gusset as I need to. If I'm having some really difficult areas, I can still cut into the gusset so that the gusset can kind of spread around the corners and make it easier to sew down. Using a stiletto is really helpful. Go slow. I will also be using a zipper foot. I find a zipper foot helpful for this, but whatever presser foot you're most comfortable with using, use that one. Alrighty, here we go. So if you'd like to go around a second time, I find that's really helpful. I don't know if you can see, but sometimes when I go around these curves, my stitching, instead of being a nice curve, it's kind of like woo, 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 woo. And so if you go around a second time, you can smooth those out and get really nice curves. I also have a tendency to make the curves bigger than the seam allowance I'm trying to go for. So if I have that, like over here, you know, I've got some of it just sticking out too far, I trim it down just a little bit. I don't want to trim my seam allowance smaller than 3/8 of an inch, but I don't want it to be bigger than 3/8 of an inch either. So I'm just going to go around checking all my curves, kind of going like that. There we go. Again, don't trim it down smaller than 3/8 of an inch. We do need that for the binding. And then I'm going to try this too. I'm going to make little slits into both the gusset and the exterior front panel, just on the curves. See if that helps with the binding. The binding is really easy to add. We're going to do that in just a moment. But I just want to see how this looks. All right. So now, before we add the binding, I do want to take a look at this. So I'm going to flip it all right side out and poke out those corners. Make sure I don't have any big pleats. If you have any big pinches or pleats, you can unpick that one area and re-sew it. You can fix it. All right, let's close it. Yeah, that looks great, doesn't it? That's beautiful. I love it. All right, so I'm going to add the binding to this before I attach the other side. You don't have to. You can attach both sides and then do the binding last, whatever's easiest for you. So here's my long strip of binding, and just like I did on the short strip, I'm actually just going to fold it wrong sides together, long sides together, just to create a midpoint fold. And with water-resistant canvas, it's going to hold that fold really nicely. If you're using waterproof canvas, it probably won't. With waterproof canvas, I would not do this. I would just wrap it around the seam and be done with it. But since water resistant canvas can hold a bit of a fold, it allows us to get a more precise, polished finish, which I really like. All right, so I've got that folded. I always like to start it at the top by the zipper gusset because I feel like that's the least noticeable area. And all I'm gonna do is just wrap this around the seam. Yes, the raw edges of the binding are on the outside. I think it's fine. I've never had a problem with that. That's why I like doing this with waterproof canvas. The double folding of cotton woven material makes me not want to do binding, but using the waterproof canvas like this makes binding a whole lot easier. So I'm just tucking the seam into the binding, wrapping it around, and adding a clip. It's very, very simple. Okay, once I have it mostly clipped on, I let it overhang where I started, so I just kind of flop it down. And I'm eyeballing it, but about an inch. I cut it off about an inch so it goes over. And then just keep clipping it down. And then I'll overlap where I started, just like that, and clip in place. Nice and neat, nice and easy. No, I just love using this so much. So now I'm going to just top stitch this down anywhere between a 1/4 inch and a 3/8 inch seam allowance. You want to make sure when you're stitching on the top, you're also catching the back. So it's better to have a smaller seam than too big of a seam, and then you have to do a second stitch down. You know what I mean? Okay, so once you have that top stitch, you want to flip it over and you just want to check the back and make sure you caught everything. Okay, everything looks good. And you might notice whenever I'm doing my binding, I do have pleats on my binding. My binding will fold over itself. It's fine. It is not noticeable. Trust me, it's not noticeable. So again, let's just flip this out. This is what we do, and look, see what it looks like. Oh yeah, that's looking great. And the nice thing about binding is that it provides a really nice structure for the bag. This is not a thick material. We don't have any firm interfacing to make this a very structured, firm bag, but the binding will keep it as like a skeleton. And so while the material is loose, the structure is still there. So let's attach the back panel now. Same exact way we did the front panel. So now grab your exterior back panel and lay it right side up. I can tell my back side's a little dirty. So lay it right side up. And then take your unit that has the zipper gusset and we're going to lay it so that the zipper is right side down and match up those midpoint marks. You might find it easier just to look at the back of the back panel, and then let's match up the midpoint marks on the bottom gusset and the bottom of the back main panel. And then I'm going to once again match up the side midpoint marks. I think that is actually really helpful because probably one of the most trickiest parts of this bag is figuring out exactly how it all goes, and if it doesn't twist just right, it's going to be a little bit of a wonky bag. So marking those midpoints on the sides I think is really helpful. There we go. And once all the straight edges are good, now again, we're just going to tuck in the corner bits, kind of like a bowl. They should go together pretty easily, even if there is a little bit of bubbling, that's okay. All right, and all the corners I am going to trim into the gusset just by about 1/4 inch or so, maybe a little bit less than 1/4 inch. I just do like 2 or 3 snips, not many. I keep my scissors next to me at the sewing machine, so if I have a corner that's just being really difficult, and the main panel and the gusset just keep separating and I can't seem to bring them back together, then I'll grab my scissors and I'll cut into the gusset a little bit more. But you don't want to overdo it because if the gusset now becomes too spread out, you have the opposite problem where the gusset will start pleating. So you gotta find that balance. It just takes practice. But start with just like 2 or 3 little clips into the gusset, and then if you need more, you can add more. All right, now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along the clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once again, I do like to sew with the gusset wrong side up and just smush the bag out of your way as you're sewing. So just like we did on the other side, just check your corners, the rounded bits, because sometimes, again, mine get a little bit bigger than the seam allowance. And the reason I trim it down to the seam allowance is because if it's too big, then my binding won't be able to wrap around it and cover the stitches, which is, you know, the nice thing about binding is that it gives you a nice finished look without you having to make everything perfect. All right, that's good. If you haven't already, make sure your zipper is open. And then I'm going to trim little slits into both the gusset and the back panel, just around these corners, just a couple of them. That'll help prevent these corners from getting too pinched or boxy. You want to keep them nice and smooth. And then let's grab our remaining piece of binding, and I'm going to start once again at the top. This is a nice structure. I like this. I like the width of this. This is good. This is really good. And make sure you pre-fold your binding if you like to. I find it very helpful. And then I like to start at the top and just wrap the binding around the seam and clip in place. And I'll go around the entire seam doing this. Okay, and then once I get towards the end, I let the binding overhang where I started by about 1 inch. And then I just trim it down and then fold it over the start of the binding. There we go, and clip in place. And now I'm going to sew this on at about a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I found that worked really well on the other side. So I'm going to top stitch this on at a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way around, just connecting the binding. Go slow and make sure, use a stiletto and just keep checking the bottom to make sure none of it moves out of the way as you're sewing. Okay, moment of truth. Let's check the back of this. Looks like everything was caught. Good, good, good. Now let's turn the whole pouch right side out. Okay, let's zip it up. Oh yeah. Okay, so I am loving the width of this. I think it's good. I think it could even be wider. I do. I think you could even make it another inch wider. So here's the original one, and here's the new one. So you can see the width difference. It's just a bit wider, but I think you could go another inch wider, and I think this is perfect, especially for traveling, for toiletries. I think this is awesome. And as you fill it up with things, it'll just keep its structure even better. Oh my gosh, this is so cute. All right, so I think this turned out lovely, and I really do like that we added some width to this. I do think you could probably go another 1/2 inch to 1 inch wider, to be honest, but this is a great size. So here they are compared to one another. Here you go. You see how this is just slightly wider than this one, but it is enough that it makes it much easier for it to just stand upright on your table, on your hand, wherever you need it. So personally, what we actually use these for in our business is storing materials. We have a lot of small products that are in different phases of being built. So we'll put like a bunch of little acrylic clip bits into here while we're building them. And it's just perfect because you can get very creative with this. You could embroider the front. You could add some applique, some heat transfer vinyl. There's a lot of fun things you can do with this because it's such a basic starter kind of project that you could build on a ton. And also you could do this in clear vinyl and it would look amazing. I do need to try one in clear vinyl. I do. I always get a little nervous with clear vinyl, but I do need to try making one of these with clear vinyl. So I hope that this video inspires you to give this pattern a try. I hope it inspires you to try out those curves if you haven't already. Definitely try out this nylon material if it's available. I have lots of links for it down below. It is wonderful material. I highly recommend it. I know more colors are coming. You know we got to make some wild neon color blocking ones, but this is a bag for everybody, right? Everybody in your family could use a basic pouch like this. And you could have lots of fun with adding like a little hand loop right here, with adding little tabs here. I mean, there's so much fun stuff you can do. So if you tweak this and add to it, please, if you post it on social media, please tag me. I really want to see what you're making. You can also send me an email. I'm Jessica@OklaRoots.com. And on social media, I am just OklaRoots over on Instagram and Facebook. I hope that you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.